Well, it is 4 o'clock. So shall we begin? Just to get started and do some housekeeping, I'm going to hand it over to one of our co-hosts, Sarah Ortiz, here to do some housekeeping, as well as Ugo to do some translation for us.
Hello all, thank you for joining us. If you would like to see live transcription in English of this meeting, there's the button at the bottom of your screen and you can read live transcription. There's also an option for simultaneous Spanish translation. It's the globe at the bottom of your screen. You can press that and you will receive simultaneous translation from Ugo. I would ask if you would like simultaneous Spanish translation to raise your hand now in the app, either by in the app or pressing *9 so we know if anybody needs translation. Thank you.
Para las personas que necesiten transcripción, se va a estar traduciendo esto también al español. En la parte de abajo ustedes pueden encontrar un icono que dice transcripción o que también dice traducción. En el caso de que ustedes quieran traducción al español, solamente oprimen el botoncito que dice español o pueden levantar la mano para que nosotros entonces sepamos quién necesita traducción. De la misma manera que las personas que se hayan conectado por teléfono, solamente opriman la estrella 9 y automáticamente entonces estarán conectados.
Okay. So with that, we'll get started. I'll begin by just welcoming everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have a number of participants who have hopped on the call. I'm Jen Kuzmar. I'm the acquisition manager. Many of you know me as the matching grant coordinator. I've taken on a new role, but I'm still filling in as coordinator in some ways. We also have Lori McNow, who I'll let introduce herself, who's helping us facilitate this year's program cycle.
Great. Hello, everybody. I want to say one thing before I get started. There should be a sign-up sheet in the chat, and we would like everybody who is here, if you to go into the Google Sheet and sign in so we know who came to our virtual open house today. As Jen said, my name is Lori McNabb. I am a planning consultant that's been hired to help manage the matching grant cycle 2022. My background is I once worked at the Open Space District in the early 2000s. I'm a land use planner by training, and I worked for the city of Santa Rosa and other cities in Sonoma County. And I'm really excited to be back at the Open Space District and helping manage the Matching Grant Program 2022 and helping preserve our beautiful landscapes in Sonoma County. Next slide, please. And I will say, Jen and I are not in the same location doing this presentation, so there may be some lag in between slides, so bear with us. So here's our agenda for today. Today, we are going to do an overview of what the Ag and Open Space District is, Ag and Open Space. We're going to do an overview of the Matching Grant Program. We are going to talk about projects that are eligible and groups that are eligible to apply for matching grant projects. We're going to go over the evaluation criteria, what Ag and Open Space looks at when looking at all the applications that come in. And lastly, we will talk about matching grant program requirements that are required if your project gets accepted into the program. Next slide, please. So on the screen, you will see the mission statement of Ag and Open Space. You will also see the full and formal name of the Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District. In 1990 and again in 2006, the voters of Sonoma County approved a 1/4-cent sales tax, and that sales tax money goes towards the protection of open space lands throughout Sonoma County. Most of the land Ag and Open Space protects in Sonoma County is through a conservation easement. A conservation easement is a legal document And we will talk more about exactly what that is later in the program. We jumped ahead, but I'm good. We're all good. So this is what is this? The expenditure plan. The expenditure plan is one of the guiding documents for ag and open space, and it is within the expenditure plan that the matching grant program is discussed. And the intent of the program is to bring resources to create and improve urban open spaces within and near populated cities, populated areas. And over the last 30 plus years, ag and open space has been able to grant monies for some great projects. And we're going to go over a few of those so you can see what types of projects that the program funds. So to date, the program has, it says 40 million on the screen. To date, the program has actually spent $30 million and another $10 million for projects that are in the pipeline from 1990 till now. And on the screen, you will see a picture of the Great and Green, which is a fairly recent matching grant recipient. It's a 1/2 acre park in the community of Grayton behind a brand new townhome project. And this project is unique because the grant recipient was a nonprofit. So the matching grant program has protected over 300 acres of natural habitat. And on the side, you will see Colgan Creek. Colgan Creek is a riparian corridor south of Elsie Allen High School. And this project was a project that Ag and Open Space did with the city of Santa Rosa. So the program has helped fund 27 new parks, which are open to the public throughout Sonoma County. And in the pipeline right now are 3 additional parks that the Open Space District will help expand. And I will go forward. So and to date, we have protected over 500 acres within and near cities. And we have, I think, another 400 acres in the pipeline. So I'm going to go over the guidelines. And I want to say that as of about 3:30 today, the 2022 matching grant guidelines were posted to the website. And there will be a link to the website in the chat. But if you go on the districts or the Ag and Open Space webpage, if you go under the How We Work tab, you will find the Matching Grant Program website. And there you will find a copy of the 2022 guidelines and application. So I want to say in 2020, there was a major update to the guidelines based on recipient feedback for the Fiscal Oversight Committee and the board. And for the 2022 guidelines, there are very few changes. The changes are minor, the largest change being addition of diversity, equity, and inclusion into our consideration of applications. So welcome. We're so glad you're here today. Today, April 21st, marks the kickoff for the 2022 matching grant cycle. This presentation is being recorded. So I think early next week, you'll be able to find re-listen to this if you want to from the website. We're hoping that these next 2 months you take to prepare applications. The application deadline is July 1st, 2022. That is a Friday. And these next 2 months too, looking at the guidelines and asking questions as you have them. And then for this go round, there's a $4 million budget. So this $4 million will be divvied up amongst those projects which staff recommends to the board for acceptance into the program. So I want to talk about some of the terms that we're going to use today, and then some of the terms that you will see in the matching grant guidelines. The first is, what is grant versus what is a match? So a grant is the amount of funding that you will be requesting from Ag and Open Space. And the match is the amount of money that your organization will bring to the table. And the match can be cash, it can be other grants, it could be in-kind or donations. The matching grant agreement is, if your project is accepted into the program, you will enter into a matching grant agreement with Ag and Open Space. The agreement will describe what the project is, what monies Ag and Open Space will fund, what your grant or what your match monies will fund, and there will also be other contract terms. The conservation easement, which I talked about earlier, is required for all projects accepted into the program. A conservation easement goes over the property which we are protecting, and it codifies permitted and prohibited uses on the property. And I said codified because I think of a conservation easement as a miniature zoning code, which talks about what you can and cannot do on a property. For every conservation easement, we tailor it to the project at hand. So there'll be lots of back and forth between Ag and Open Space and the recipient in drafting this document. Once the document is drafted and recorded, it runs with the land. So if your agency sells to another agency, the conservation easement will always be in place. The recreation covenant is also a legal document between the landowner and Ag and Open Space. And Ag and Open Space uses recreation covenants for projects where public recreation is the main purpose of the project. And the rec covenant ensures that properties where public dollars are spent remain open to public recreation. So the matching grant agreement, the conservation easement, and the recreation covenant, there are samples of all three of those documents in the appendices of the guidelines, and you can also find examples on the website. So now I'm going to talk about who's qualified to apply for matching grant through Ag and Open Space, and then also what types of projects that we will fund. So applicants that can apply, 501c3 nonprofits and public agencies. And there's also been instances where a public agency and a nonprofit apply together as co-applicants. And if co-application is the way you want to go, Ag and Open Space does ask that you provide evidence or an agreement, that you have an agreement that you're going to work together. The types of projects that you can apply for are acquisition projects, so buying land for open space or recreation, or improving land for recreation, which would be like you are going to build a trail, or the project could be a combination of both. What projects are not eligible for the program? There's a list, pretty exhaustive list on page 7 of the guidelines. I'll talk about a few projects that fulfill mitigation requirements, projects where the acquisition of the property is through eminent domain, and projects where you're replacing a facility with another facility, an updated facility for the same purpose. And if you're in doubt whether or not your project is eligible or not, I encourage you to reach out to us. At the end of the slideshow, we'll have an email address. You can email questions and we will help you evaluate whether or not you are eligible to apply. So other things that you will need to pull together to apply for the matching grant program is a governing body authorization. And this is a resolution from your board of directors or from your city council, which gives you permission to apply for a matching grant. And we have samples of a resolution document in the appendices. So you have some language to model when you're putting together a resolution for your board or your city council. Location. So in the beginning, the matching grant program was only for incorporated cities. So if you have a project in an incorporated city, yes, you're eligible, but Ag and Open Space over time has expanded that. And besides incorporated areas, we're also looking at unincorporated communities like Pengrove, The Springs, Monterey, etc. It's any kind of urban area that's within half a mile of an existing urban growth boundary or a community with a census block of more than 100 people. So it's, we've expanded where matching grant funds can go. And fiscal review. So Ag and Open Space wants to make sure that the projects where we give money to are fiscally solvent. So you will be required to submit the most recent audit of your organization so we can review that as part of your application. And long-term benefits. So all Ag and Open Space monies, we want to make sure that the money is going towards projects where there'll be a long-term benefit to the community. And the time horizon that we are looking for is 20 years or more. And finally, Ag and Open Space wants to see a complete application. You will need to submit a complete application in order to continue to be evaluated for inclusion in the Ag program, matching grant program. So I will stop there. You will see this sweet lamb a couple times in the presentation, and it's the sign that we're taking a break for questions. You can ask questions in the chat, raise your hand, or Sarah or Hugo, if you need to speak, please do.
I think the one question I saw in the chat is, does the conservation easement need to be new, or is a pre-existing easement allowed? And I would say it depends. So conservation easements that were acquired through the matching grant program would be eligible projects for something distinct and different than what we previously funded in the matching grant program. If there's a conservation easement on a property that we acquired through our traditional sort of conservation easement acquisition or transfer of land to, say, a recreational partner, those projects are ineligible. And that's just a way that we distinguish the funding through what's eligible for our initial public access operations and maintenance funding in the matching grant program. So those are, so if there's a specific property or question, we could certainly get into those details afterwards. And then there's a question about match no longer being required. We'll talk about the match requirements a little bit further down the road. We no longer require, just the quick and dirty is it's no longer has to be a one-to-one, but projects that bring a dollar for dollar match are the most competitive. But we have scoring criteria that scale based on the amount of match as well as how secure your match is. And then I see a question from Daniel about the proximity parameters to an urban area. So we have some mapping. You can see there's a link in the guidelines. So basically looking at that half a mile from an urban service area, those census tracts, or outside of a city limit. We also provide some flexibility there, that if you feel like you are representing a community that doesn't fit those parameters, to provide some explanation on how the project will benefit a community. Without seeing any other questions, and we have a couple other breaks throughout the presentation, I'll continue on and we'll pick up any other questions that we have along the way. I see maybe we'll take one more. Catherine has her hand raised. If we can permit her speaking privileges, then I'll answer that question and we'll move on to the rest of the presentation. And I see, go ahead.
Yeah, I had put a couple other questions in the chat that I think you may not have spotted. One was if the organization doesn't do an audit, do you accept other financial documents?
We can accept other financial documents, yes.
Okay. And if the property we're hoping to submit, it has a conservation easement with another entity, does that make it ineligible?
Yes, most likely that would is already did.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. Let's see. And then one last question here from Sarah. Can the conservation easement include public visitation through guided hikes and school visits? Yeah, we can talk about what the specifics of that might look like depending on the property. We have had some projects where there's a restoration component, like a natural resource restoration component. Having that open to public, sunrise to sunset 7 days a week may not be appropriate. So we can talk about the specifics. However, looking to see that if the purpose of the project is public recreation, that it's open to the public more often than not. But we could certainly discuss the specifics of that with you, depending on what the nature of the project is. Okay, with that, I'm going to carry on. And again, thank you for the great questions, and we'll keep them coming as we move through. So I'm going to get into a little bit more about the evaluation criteria. So one of the things, what we just said, which is talking about sort of minimum thresholds for the program, what the program is about, some background and history. And for those of you who aren't as familiar with the matching grant program, what we've tried to do is provide a through line from the guidelines to the application to our evaluation criteria. So there should be content in the guidelines that help you understand how to answer the questions in the application, and then the evaluation matrix that we use to actually evaluate all applications is provided as well, so you can see how we'll be looking at projects. So there's essentially 5 criteria that we consider with each matching grant project, or with each application. And I'm going to go through each of these 5 that you can see on the screen here in detail. First is looking at program intent. So, we provided our mission statement as well as an excerpt from our expenditure plan. So thinking about what we really think of the intent of the matching grant program. As an ag preservation and open space district, we really see that the matching grant program is an opportunity to create vibrant open spaces and opportunities for people to experience open space within and near their communities, close to home, somewhere they can touch and feel and see without having to travel to far places in the county. So we want to evaluate, being able to lock down those types of open spaces is really unique and something that is some of the most competitive type of work that we like to see through the program. Applications that are seeking to both acquire new and develop open space are the most competitive. Looking to expand existing open space is also highly competitive. And then additional phases of our existing protected lands are certainly eligible, though maybe less competitive. Again, just wanting to see that, being able to protect these spaces forever really feels like it meets the spirit and intent of what this program was created for. And then there's other program intent priorities. There's 8 of them. So when you look at the evaluation matrix that's included in the appendices, the more of these that you hit, the more points that you get, but we want to discourage folks from just trying to make their project check the boxes. A well thought out, well-designed, community supported project that hits only a couple of these, but does it really well is still a really competitive project. So things that we're looking at in terms of meeting that intent of protecting new or expanding open space are projects that link our communities. So that may be through connections through regional trail systems, connecting one open space to another, connecting the community to each other, providing spaces for folks to gather, providing that connection to open space. Protection or the construction of public access to public waterways like the Russian River, the Pacific Ocean, or other public waterways, seeing that more and more there may be privatized access to our public waterways. Projects that meet the intent also implement restoration techniques. So natural resource restoration, riparian restoration, marshlands, protection of native plant or animal species. So kind of hitting some of these open space targets that meet our mission. Construction of outdoor and community gathering spaces. We've funded a number of projects that have created a there in a community where there wasn't a space for the community to gather, say for a farmer's market or for some cultural celebration. And the remaining 3 program and priorities are not in order of importance, they're just in the order that they're in the guidelines, are the development of new outdoor and nature-based recreation. So again, as an open space district, wanting to provide opportunities to experience nature even close to our communities. construction of those amenities for education about nature or local agriculture. And then finally, protection of farmland that provides urban green space and access to locally grown food and fiber. And so the picture here that you can see, Sonoma Garden Park, is a great example of that sort of ag-based matching grant program project that's got a working farm. They do educate, open public setting, but you're in a place that's actively growing food. Other criteria that we look at, you can see here on the screen: need, benefits, and readiness. And so the need is wanting to see, how have you identified the need for this project? Is it something you just cooked up sitting around a table one night, or is it something that's been identified in an adopted plan or multiple plans? Or how has the community identified that this is an important project to them that needs to happen? What are the public benefits of that? As a public agency spending public dollars, we want to understand how any of the projects you put funds towards or benefit the human community and the natural community. And so there's some examples of these listed in the guidelines as well. In terms of readiness, we do have some timeframes associated with when we want to see projects complete: 3 years for acquisition and 5 for improvement projects. But the more ready you are to go, the more competitive your project may be in terms of how much planning you've done, how far along you are in the design, how much fundraising have you done, or is this just a nascent idea? And again, these aren't make or break. These are just factors that we consider as we're evaluating the projects. The application will ask for you to provide an outline of what are the tasks and deliverables that you anticipate as a part of your project, what's the schedule, and what's your budgeting. So demonstrating that you've thought through all of the steps that may be required for the project. As far as planning and design, making sure you can demonstrate that you're clear on what sort of permits you may need, what kind of environmental compliance there may be required. Do you have conceptual designs? Is it just a visual concept right now? Where are you at in that planning and design? We also ask for applicants to demonstrate what their experience or their partners or team or consultants they be with, what experience you have in doing this type of a project, wanting to see that you're really ready to take this on, or you're looking to people who have that type of experience if you don't have it in-house. And then finally, that funding match and security. So that gets to, we do require that you bring, it's a matching grant program, so you need to bring some funding to the table. But our board gave us some flexibility in the 2020 cycle that we're carrying forward now of how much that can be. So the funding match can be a 1-to-1. Maybe not all of that's secure. Maybe you've put out some grant applications that would bring you to that full dollar for dollar match, but you haven't received notification that you've been awarded that. So that might be getting you towards the number, but not the security. But you may know that you've got X number of dollars in the bank from donations your organization has received for this project. So looking at how secure your match is in terms of how tangible it is to be used for the project. So those are some of the things that we consider as a part of the application. We do have some limitations on what you can utilize the funding for. So up to 50% of your match can go towards operations and maintenance, and that can be eligible for 10 years. So beyond the life of what the matching grant project itself, as far as we consider in terms of incomplete, that isn't eligible for grant funding. And then 25% of your match can be used for planning and design or other administrative costs. And there's a table in the appendices that will give you some examples of types of eligible and ineligible match and grant activities. And finally, there are these 5 other considerations that we have as a part of the guidelines that aren't scored through the matrix. The evaluation matrix is based on a 100-point scoring system, but these are things that we take outside of that just to be able to think about a project in a whole that are really hard to sort of put points associated with. The first being diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a place where we plan to do a lot of work in the coming year in advance of the 2024 cycle. Right now, what we're looking at is just, how are projects demonstrating, is it a project that is located in an area where there are few or no open space opportunities? Is it a new applicant to the program? Is it someone who's never received application or received matching grant funding before or would be implementing a project that's never had a matching grant project. So we're looking at geographic equity and diversity. We're looking at both applicant and then just trying to see that we're actually serving the entire county the best ability through these community-led projects. And so speaking of community-led, we want you to be able to demonstrate that there's broad community support for your program or for your project. You have an opportunity to provide letters of support as a part of your application. We typically ask that folks submit those letters from organizations rather than individuals. And we also ask that you not ask our board to provide letters of support since they'll ultimately be doing some decision making, but your city council, other organizations that support your project, and as a part of the application, talking about how you have or plan to engage the community to demonstrate that this is something that the community truly wants and supports moving forward. Something else that we may consider as a part of our evaluation is past matching grant performance. This isn't, again, a make or break. We're not going to completely penalize someone or give them the boot from the program if they've had some challenges in previous projects. We know that happens. But good or bad performance can be a part of the consideration. If we are wanting performance on an existing project, we may condition a future award on completing some elements of a previous project. And next, we also reserve the right to prioritize projects that may be located in fire or flood impacted communities, seeing that may be a way that through Ag and Open Space and through this program, we're able to help do some rebuilding from some of the natural disasters that have impacted our communities over the last several years. And finally, just looking at sort of overall quality of the application. How much effort did were they 1 or 2 sentence responses? Did you provide 20 pages? How have you really thought through your application? And again, scores associated with this. These are just other things that we consider as a part of the evaluation. I want to make sure that we're transparent about what that is. And so now we're back to another sheet and available to take some more questions. Let's see. I'm scrolling through here to see some questions. Okay, so question from Susan Kirks. If a matching grant has been awarded but not yet used and circumstances related to that grant change, is there a way and timeline to return the grant and reapply in a different process with higher levels of protection for natural resources and an innovative access, volunteering, and education for this property? Can rescind a grant and reapply for a new envisioned project. We actually had that happen in the last funding cycle, trail project that had been in the works for a long time that has taken a slightly different shape. Now they reapplied. There was no guarantee they were going to be accepted in the last funding cycle, but the project ended up being really competitive and being recommended for funding, which means the other grant goes away. It doesn't necessarily roll over. Those funds hadn't been encumbered. It's not like bonus money all of a sudden, but it was a new award that was accepted. Another question about can connectivity refer to wildlife corridors? I think linking natural communities is certainly something that we would look for in the linking communities and other protection of plant and animal species. And then another question here, can you give an estimated range of the average number and size of typical grants awarded? That's a great question. We get asked that a lot. We have $4 million available countywide. We've funded everything from a $50,000 grant to over $1 million. I typically advise folks to not ask for all 4 because we're very unlikely to award just one project, but to be realistic on what your costs are. One of the questions in the application will ask how scalable your ask may be, because often we get a lot of really highly competitive projects and we can't fully fund them all. So thinking about steps or phases of your project can be really important. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, does that refer to the applicant, not the community who will benefit from the project? I'd say both. So we're looking at both a diversity of applicants as well as the diversity of the communities that these projects would benefit. So I apologize if I maybe didn't articulate that as well as I could have. And then how many projects do you expect to fund with the $4 million? it in part depends on how many applications we get and how competitive they may be. We typically fund anywhere in a normal cycle, anywhere from 6 to 10, and we may have received anywhere from 8 to 20 applications. We do our best to try to fund all competitive, fund or partially fund as many competitive projects as we can. That looks like all the questions from the chat. If anyone has a question and wants to raise their hand, we can answer those now. And if not, I will move on. Take a quick sip of water. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little about the evaluation process, and we'll move into the last part of the presentation, which will just be, if you're accepted into the program, what does that mean you're getting yourself into? So just really quickly, using both the application and the evaluation matrix, just want to walk through so to understand what our process looks like. We'll receive all applications by July 1st. We won't really take a look at them much before that. The first thing we do is just do a completeness review, making sure that everything is complete. Incomplete projects won't be considered to move forward. Complete projects will do a deeper dive and do a full evaluation. Lori and myself and some internal staff at Ag and Open Space will do a staff review and evaluation using that matrix. And then we also work with a subcommittee that consists of members from our board appointed advisory committee and fiscal oversight commission. And so that subcommittee works with staff after we've done our review to review all of the projects, as well as tee up recommendations for our board. During the staff review, this may take several months. This will be taking place over the summer. We may reach out to applicants for clarifying questions. We typically try to go out and actually see each project. There's nothing, you can read a lot, you can look at pictures, but there's nothing better than seeing an actual project on the ground. So we typically try to do that through the evaluation process. After we work through the staff level and the subcommittee review, and we've drafted some preliminary recommendations, we present those at public meetings of our advisory committee and fiscal oversight commission. So that's an opportunity. If you're an applicant and you've been accepted into the program, or if you're not being, or if you're being recommended, or if you're not being recommended, we'll be in communication with you so you know where your project stands. And in those public meetings, you certainly have an opportunity as a member of the public and an applicant to express support of your project, or whatever you might want to do there. We encourage folks to attend those meetings, and those are meetings of the public. They tee up, they support, or maybe make different recommendations as we're on our way to our board of directors, who are the ultimate decision makers in what projects get accepted into the program and at what funding level. So we bring forward a staff subcommittee and these other commission and committee recommendations to our board for consideration. And now that we've got this evaluation matrix, we've got some scores associated with that to help us with our justification of those recommendations as well. Lori, I saw your hand up.
Just in case I didn't say it out loud, and in case there's some people in the audience that are new to Ag and Open Space, the board of directors is the county board of supervisors. So when Jen said earlier, don't, asking the county board supervisor, your supervisor for a letter of recommendation, it makes it difficult because the board of supervisors is our board of directors and they will be making that final decision.
That's correct. Yeah. So they're the same humans wearing different hats as board of supervisors and board of directors. And so since they'll be making the decision, we want to just avoid any conflicts of interest there, or so since they're on behalf of the entire district. Thank you, Lori, for that distinction. And okay, we've got another pause for questions here. And I realized that I didn't say before, if you do need simultaneous translation, you can click the globe at the bottom to either have a question asked in Spanish or responses there, as well as the live transcript if you want to see that in English. Is it a conflict if one of the council members is on our advisory board? No, that's a great question. We have some practices in place where we avoid conflict with the council members being on the subcommittee. So if anyone has involved in application, either as a member of a board of directors for a nonprofit, or they sit on the city council of a city that has applied, we typically ask them to recuse themselves from participating in the subcommittee. They may recuse themselves from further discussion in the public meeting, but we can still, it's not a conflict for you to apply to the program. So we've done our best, and all of that is really, you know, legally, we don't have to, because the advisory committee isn't a decision maker, but just for perception and making sure that we're being really transparent, we've tried to avoid any perceived conflicts of interest. So we're really cautious and careful about that. And then in terms of the timing for final board approval, we anticipate that will bring recommendations to our board of directors this fall. And that sort of starts the clock ticking for when we begin working on projects. And so it depends on when your project is ready to go. And I'll talk a little bit about how grant funds are distributed in the next section, Daryl. Any other questions before we move on to the program requirements? Okay. Move off the lamb then. So just to reiterate again what the requirements are, sort of when the rug hits the road, if your project's recommended for funding, these are the things, these are the, you know, strings that will be attached to that funding. So we will enter into a grant agreement. That's essentially a contract between Ag and Open Space and your organization, outlining the terms of what we expect to receive as a part of that grant, what your matching would be eligible for, their work plan requirements, reporting requirements, other contractual obligations. That's just associated with the grant. All matching grant projects, we require that Ag and Open Space receive a conservation easement on the property where the funding is being expended. And that's a permanent deed restriction that runs with the land in perpetuity. So that's one of the biggest decision makers, I think, for a lot of new applicants, is making sure that that's something you're willing as a property owner to take on, that you will have those permanent restrictions on permitted and prohibited uses on that property forever. If it's a public access project, a public recreation project, again, we require that recreation covenant to ensure that that property remain open to the public in perpetuity. If you're looking to acquire land through the matching grant program, if that's part of what your application is, ultimately we'll need a property appraisal. We do ask that folks have some sort of opinion of value if they don't have an appraisal done at the time of application, so that we understand that your request for acquisition is reasonable and is based in some, you know, has some basis for what that value might be. Your property would be appraised. We have a third-party appraiser review those. We have guidelines and standards for appraisals, and those are included in the appendices as well. Ag and Open Space can't pay more than fair market value for any property that we provide funding for acquisition. So that's worth noting. You know, the outside world real estate market can get crazy and people can pay whatever kind of money they want for anything. As a public agency, we're limited to paying only not above fair market value. And then the schedule for project completion, just to reiterate, there are timelines established in the guidelines. For acquisition projects, you have 3 years from when our board accepts you into the program to complete that acquisition. For improvement projects, so that's a restoration, a recreation development, some ag-related project, you have 5 years from our board's acceptance to complete that phase of the project. So some combination, if it's an acquisition and improvement, you'd have 3 years to do the acquisition and 5 years to do the improvement. And so that clock starts ticking if we get, let's say we go to the board November 1st, and that's when that 3 or 5 year time commitment starts then. There are provisions in the guidelines that allow us to grant some extensions if an applicant or a grantee is demonstrating progress or has some reason, and those are at our discretion to grant those extensions. And then in terms of payment of grant funds, the matching grant program, generally speaking, is a reimbursement. So once you have a grant agreement in place and we've negotiated the conservation easement and the recreation covenant, then we're in a position to start reimbursing for the project. So you would submit invoices to Ag and Open Space based on what is outlined in your grant agreement as being eligible, or your work plan that's associated with that, to request reimbursement. there are working requests that are required. Sierra, I see your hand up. Should I pause for a moment?
I just wanted to address a question in the chat. Do you want to define what a recreation covenant is before we go further?
Yeah, we did that. I'll reiterate it. So a recreation covenant is a deed. Thank you for pointing that out. Want to make sure folks know what we're talking about here. A recreation covenant is an additional deed restriction that requires that the property remain open to the public in perpetuity. There's some remedies in there if the landowner isn't able to provide that, but essentially wanting to see that our public dollars spent on rec properties remain open to the public, that they aren't closed for some reason. Thank you for stopping me there to make sure that folks are all clear on that. Other program requirements, we ask that you keep good accounting records. Should we ever need to see them or have questions about how the money has been spent, we want to make sure that we have a transparent process on both sides of the transaction. The matching grant agreement, again, number 2, will have some reporting requirements. That's typically done no more frequently than monthly and no less frequently than quarterly, so that we're able to kind of keep track of where you're at with your project. We do have, fiscal and project monitoring, so we'll be tracking your project along. We may come out to visit to see how things are going, take some photos. And then we also ask that you retain your records for 5 years after project completion. So those are some things we just want to make sure that folks know you're accepted in the program. And we'll have a kickoff meeting if you are, so that you understand all these again. But sometimes it's good to know before you even apply for a grant, to know what you might be getting yourself into if you are indeed accepted. And this is the end of the information that we're going to provide today, and we'll pause for questions. And Lori, it looked like you have something to add.
Oh, just one more, I guess, clarification. You talked about doing site visits as part of evaluating, well, one, if it's an application, but once it's in the program, to make sure that they're performing as they said they would. But then the other thing I wanted to say is that if there's a conservation easement on the property, that the district will be coming out every 18 months, I guess is what it is now, in perpetuity, to manage and make sure that the conservation easement is being followed.
Yes, thank you for making sure we point that out. So yeah, part of our obligation of holding these conservation easements is making sure that the properties are managed and stewarded in a way that meets the terms of that easement. So our stewardship team does aim to come out to all easements every 12 to 18 months to just make sure that just to do some monitoring visits. And so thank you for making sure to point that out. The only other question I see in the chat right now, I think that we haven't answered, is does the district provide a list of recommended appraisers if an acquisition is being considered? We have a list of appraisers that we ask to provide bids to us for appraisals that we want to have done. We don't recommend anyone, but we can provide you the list of folks that we do, and you're welcome to reach out to them. And then what we said about mitigation. So we won't provide funding for mitigation on site or for a project that is required for mitigation of some activity somewhere else. So Caltrans does something and they need to do some mitigation. You can't apply to the matching grant program to fund that. Now, something that might go above and beyond what might be required for mitigation could be something that would be considered. And we're happy to talk about any specifics of anything related to that with a project with an individual applicant. And then what's the timing for final board approvals, and when are the grant funds distributed? So we're aiming to get to the board this fall, and then the grant funds will be distributed. We'll be working with each project that's accepted into the program on sort of lining them out based on their ideal timeframes and our capacity. So I would say at earliest, the grant funds would probably be distributed in early 2023 for the projects that are the most ready to go. And again, that's on a reimbursement basis, and we have to have negotiated the matching grant agreement, conservation easement, and if there's a rec covenant required. So all of those things need to be in place. Those are conditions of disbursement that are outlined in the matching grant agreement before we start distributing funds. Any other questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. I'll give folks just another couple seconds. Lori, is there something you want to make sure to add?
I wanted to go to the last slide in the presentation just because it puts up the best email address to send questions to about the program, as well as
there we go.
The website, which I think we've linked the website in the chat, the matching grant part of the Ag and Open Space website. But so there's a mailbox set up especially for this program this time around, the matching grant at sonoma-county.org. And both Jen and I will be monitoring that mailbox, and we will be responding to you within, a business day or so. That's our goal. And then the telephone number on the screen is the general number at Ag and Open Space that you can call and they can help field a question or send it my way or Jen's way if needed.
Thank you, Lori. I keep forgetting to put that slide up. Thank you for the reminder for the contact info. Yeah, since we're still, our office is still large telecommuting, so I'm not sitting at my desk, and Lori doesn't have a desk in our office. So our very capable staff that are manning the phones or womaning the phones in the office will make sure that they get your call routed to us, or if you leave a voicemail, they'll get that to us. Also with the email, like Lori said, we're both monitoring that. Those are the best ways to reach us if you have project specific questions. Let's see if there's anything else. Reminding folks to fill out the sign-in sheet, and then a question of, yes, program is still offered every other year. And we, part of why we are not recommending it being offered every year is it takes so long to go through the process of getting applications, evaluating them, and recommending for funding that we need some time to gear up for that each year. So every other year feels internally, capacity-wise, like a good time frame. And to our knowledge, we haven't missed any opportunities based on that schedule. If there are not any other questions, I will stop the share really quickly. Again, this presentation has been recorded, and we'll be posting a video of that on the website. We'll blast the email list that we sent information about this meeting. We want to, again, thank you all for coming. Want to thank Ugo and Denora for providing translation services. The materials we should mention are both in English and Spanish on the website. So please feel free to reach out to us. If you have a question in Spanish, we will work with our Spanish translators to provide you a thorough answer on that. And with that, we'll let you all go, and you've gained 37 minutes of your day that maybe you had otherwise blocked off. So thank you again, and we look forward to working with some of you.
I see one more question in the chat.
Oh, okay. One more question in the chat. And for those of you who are ready to hop off, please feel free. I am not seeing the question right now. Can someone read it to me?
Sure. It's
Are
from
you
Wendy.
able? Oh, sorry.
It's from Wendy. It says, are you able to discuss potential projects with applicants to ensure they are eligible? And I would say yes, if you have a project in mind, to send an email to that matching grant email address, and Jen or I will help talk you through it.
Excellent. Okay, now I can see the chat. Thanks, Wendy. All right, well, with that, we'll let you all go. And please, yes, reach out via email, reach out via that phone number, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.